The new NIDS bill has been drafted and is ready for review. We want to hear from you. Go to www.japarliament.gov.jm to download a copy of the new bill. Join the conversation. Make a written submission to Clerk to the Houses, Gordon House, 81 Duke Street, Kingston, or via email clark@japarliament.gov.jm. All written submissions must be sent by Friday, January 29, 2021. Join the process. Let your voice be heard.
Welcome viewers and listeners who have joined us for the third Joint Select Committee virtual town hall meeting of the Joint Select Committee appointed to consider and report on the bill shortly entitled the National Identification and Registration Act 2020. Viewers and listeners, we are happy to have you. We expect it will be a very enlightening and engaging evening. I am Delroy Chuck, and we have a few members of the Joint Select Committee here with us at the banquet hall. Ministers Aubin Hill, Robert Morgan, and MP Dwight Sibbles from Clarendon. We also have most, if not all, members of the Joint Select Committee joining us online or by Zoom. I am Delroy Chuck, the chairman of the committee, and also with us are members of the NIDS technical team, Mr. Warren Vernon, the program director of NIDS, Mrs. Janelle Miller-Williams, the senior legal officer in the Office of the Prime Minister, and Mrs. Sharika Hemmings-Allison, the principal director in the Office of the Prime Minister. Two other members of the NIDS team, Ms. Kamika Facey and Ms. Nadine Wilkins, will also be joining us online by Zoom. May I say that over the past two previous virtual meetings, the public engaged us significantly, and a number of questions were posed which still remain unanswered, and many of them will be dealt with in this third virtual town hall meetings. We would like the public to appreciate that once you send in your questions, we intend to respond to them. However difficult they may be, we hope that the NIDS team or members of the Joint Select Committee will answer. Many of the questions have come to us by social media, and some of them will be answered. You will appreciate that if the questions duplicate, we're not going to answer them over and over. We select a number of the questions and hope that all the questions will be responded to. In the first two virtual town hall meetings, we dealt with more than half of the sections, the clauses in the bill, and we're hoping today, tomorrow, and next week that all the sections will be thoroughly explained, and also the schedules. So by the end of the 6th virtual town hall meetings, we expect that the content of this NIDS bill will be fully explained. We want members of the public not only to engage, but to be informed and to appreciate that we want you to feel comfortable with the bill, to have confidence that the NIDS team is here available to respond to your questions. In addition, we intend to have private virtual conferences, meetings with most, if not all, the justices of the peace, because we expect and hope that the JPs will be fully sensitized and they will be the resource persons in the communities to whom members of the public can contact for even more explanation as to the content of the bill, because we expect the justices of the peace, who are the leaders in these communities, not only to be informed about the NIDS bill, but that if there are problems that any member of the public has with the bill, they can contact the justice of the peace, if the justice of the peace needs more information or better particulars, then that JP can either go to the custody or send the question to me at the Ministry of Justice or to the NIDS team, so that all issues, all queries, all skepticism, all concerns we're hoping to address, so that when the bill is debated in Parliament or when we have the face-to-face sessions in Parliament of the Joint Select Committee, that additional issues can be dealt with. So that this afternoon we have with us another moderator, the communication specialist at the Office of the Prime Minister, Mrs. Kimberly MacLeod, who will be engaging the public and responding, presenting the questions from members of the public and on social media to the committee, but more likely to the members of the NIDS team, the technical team of the Office of the Prime Minister. So I now turn over to Ms. Kimberly MacLeod.
Thank you so much, Minister. And it is my great pleasure to welcome you to the third in a series of the Joint Select Committee virtual town hall meetings looking at the National Identification Registration Bill 2020. And again, I am indeed Kimberly MacLeod, and I will be taking you through today's proceedings. I want to welcome those watching us on TV, on television, on CVM TV, PBCJ, Scene TV, JIS TV, and on social media, the NIDS facts pages, and those listening to us on Love 101 and other media outlets. I should also note that we are streaming live on the Prime Minister's pages at Andrew Holness JM on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Over the next 90 minutes, we will share with you the contents of the new Voluntary National Identification Registration Bill 2020. I remind you to use the hashtag JSCNIDS to participate, and that is JSCNIDS to participate on social media. Now, last week we had quite an engaging session. It was quite involved, and it was so good, in fact, that we have questions carried over to this week's session, which again is the third. And so we will begin by asking the technical committee to answer some of those questions which we still have from last week. And we begin with a question posed by Justine on Facebook, and Justine wants to know if the NIDS data will be stored in a single database, and I pose this question to the NIDS technical team.
Thank you for that question, Kimberly. Good afternoon, Chairman, other members of the committee, and colleagues. In respect of that question, no, the NIDS data will not be stored in a single database. Under Clause 9 of the bill, it provides for the national databases, which will consist of the civil registration databases and the national identification databases. Under the civil registration databases, there will be multiple databases, such as, for example, birth databases, which will deal with matters specifically relating to births. There will be marriage databases, death databases, to give you some examples. Also, under the national identification databases, in which all identity information will be stored. Some of the databases under national identification will be biometric databases and fingerprints databases, to name a few.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Miller-Williams. And also on Facebook, we have George Stone McCalla, who wants to know, how will they, I assume the NIDS team and the government, protect our information from smart computers acting on their own? How will their information be protected from smart computers acting on their own?
Okay, thank you, Kimberly,
and
for that question.
Mr. Warren Vernon will be answering that question for us today.
Thank you very much, Kimberly, and good afternoon, everybody. Clause 23 provides for a framework for which the authority shall put in place security plan that ensures that enrolled individuals' identity information is accorded the highest level of security to protect the information from unauthorized access, unauthorized use, unauthorized disclosure, and loss. But what do we mean by this, and what is it that the government is doing? So the government is doing a number of things, and the first one that I want to bring to your attention is that all identity information will be encrypted. All sensitive information in the databases will be encrypted. Very important to know that. The government is also enhancing the cybersecurity infrastructure of all of the ministry, departments of government and agencies that are of national importance and national significance. And these are the entities that are involved with the implementation of the National Identification Program. The government is also establishing institutions for data protection and independent oversight of the proposed National Identification and Registration Authority to guarantee oversight and those mechanisms and safeguards. Very important to note that. The government is also strengthening, as part of the NIDS program, a significant investment in strengthening the networks and the security appliances at the various endpoints that will interact with the NIDS program. The National Identification and Registration Authority will establish a cybersecurity advice hotline for national IDs holders. It's very important to note this because we are aware that security must be viewed end to end, and all of us will play a role in securing the national identification system. So we want the public to be aware of the do's and the don'ts. We want the public to be aware of the safeguards and what role they will play in the process. There is also greater investment. There is significant investment in upskilling the technical people across the system that will be involved with protecting the system, supporting the system, and we are getting the international expert to facilitate that. We are also going to invest in the Jamaica Cyber Incident Response Team. A lot of persons may not be aware that the government would have established a cyber incident response team, and we intend to invest in that team to strengthen our cybersecurity defense. And I mentioned those, but it is also important for us to understand that when you view security from the bill, we need to view security in the context of a framework, because you can't put in a bill all of the controls that you will be applying. You can't expose your security plan in that fashion. But what is the commitment in the bill is a framework that we must ensure that those controls are in place. And to bring further clarity, we are implementing a security framework that is based on the National Institute of Standards and Technology. And this is very important. This is very important for that security framework, because that security framework is taking into consideration the entire solution: people, equipment, processes, end to end. We are also using ISO standards. We are also using COBIT 5. It's very important for governance for the entire solution. So the national identification system, we can say to the public that this will be one of the most secured infrastructure to have ever been implemented by the government of Jamaica. It will be one of the most secured infrastructure. And why are we saying this? Because we're taking a number of steps. For the first time, we are implementing a national public-private key infrastructure to guarantee the security of all of the endpoints in the system. So again, there are a lot of controls, a lot of things that we are doing, and in terms of acceptable use policy, security plan, and some of those things we can't expose here. But what we are sharing with the public is the framework in which we will operate. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vernon. I'm hearing things like encryption and ISO certification and decentralization of information in various databases. So the public can be assured once again that the information that is collected, your personal information, will be safely and securely stored. Thank you again. Another question also from Facebook. Richard Lawrence wants to know, what is the difference between our current ID system when compared to the NIDS? And again, this question to our technical team.
Okay, Kimberly, I'll take that one. So, in summary, the NIDS guarantees one person to one identity. The NIDS guarantees one person to one identity, and this is a significant difference between all of the existing IDs, using multiple layers of vetting and security. Every ID that is issued by the NIDS will be linked to a unique birth certificate or a unique passport profile for persons who weren't born in Jamaica. The NIDS is unique in the sense that for the first time we will have a tool that you can use to verify who you are. You can use it to sign documents securely. You can also use it to access services online and inline. It is also important to note that we currently have no identification card that can be used by everyone from birth. Most of the identification cards that we have now are really for different segments of the population, but the NIDS is for everyone. We have no national identification card that is free for all to access. So there are a lot of persons in the country that don't have any identification document, and most times because they can't afford it. So the NIDS is free for everyone. We have no national identification card that simplifies the verification of addresses. And it's important to note this because your address will not be printed on the card. Your address will be managed by the system from the back end. In Jamaica, you have people with multiple addresses, and you have people changing their addresses every week. But the existing identification cards, the addresses are printed on it and outdated. This system will manage addresses from the back end. We have no identification card that guarantees the collection of identity and address information once. And the national IDs that we have now do not ensure that you have one person to one identity from birth. And this is the same reason. This is the very reason why we would have, earlier on in our presentation, we would have indicated that PICA reported over 2,000 cases of passport fraud cases between 2009 and 2019. The Ministry of National Security would have reported over 400 cases involving identity theft. This is the same issue. They are not guaranteeing Jamaicans one person to one identity. It is for this same reason why the aggregate losses arising from all bank-related frauds, all of them are connected to identity issues, costing the country over $600 million. So yes, the NIDS is significantly different from all of the other IDs that we have now. Thank you.
Kimberly, may I just add to what Warren is saying? The NIDS, one of the great benefits of the NIDS identification when it is actually implemented is that it will avoid identity theft. We have so many Jamaicans now who have suffered from identity theft, and their bank accounts have been depleted because they're able to use, by whatever means, identification that has been stolen. So with the NIDS identity, probably the best benefit, if I might put it that way, is that the individual will have a unique identity and no one can steal it. And to that extent, it is a benefit that all Jamaicans should appreciate, because most Jamaicans may not have been a victim of identity theft, but I know persons who have had their identity stolen, and they have to be going back to the police, to the courts, etc., etc. And after they have lost huge resources, So that is important to note as a benefit of this system.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you, Mr. Vernon. So there you have it, significant differences between the current ID system that we have and the new voluntary national identification card. So it is a convenient identification card that follows you and stays with you throughout your life that cannot be stolen. And Mr. Vernon, you answered the question that Mr. Arthony Palmer posted on Facebook: will it be issued free to all Jamaicans? But I think you may want to qualify that it is to all Jamaicans who want to have it.
Okay, great. You want to comment on that, Janu?
So in relation to that question, Kimberly, yes, the national identification card will be issued free to all Jamaicans, and also persons ordinarily resident in Jamaica who are enrolled in the system.
Okay.
So it will be free.
Okay.
Could you also explain how often it will be updated?
Okay, so in terms of validity, period of validity, in relation to persons who are 18 years, who are younger than 18 years, it will be valid for a period of 5 years. So persons who are younger than 18, the card will be valid for 5 years. For persons who are 18 and older, but younger than 60, it will be valid for 10 years. And persons who are 60 years and older, the card will be valid for 15 years.
Say that, I think it's important for us to say that no one will be left behind because of lack of identification.
Indeed. Would it be possible for you to explain what is the rationale behind the periods of validity for the national identification card, especially in relation to, well, basically all the groups that you have identified, the 5-year validity period, the 10 and the 15-year validity period?
Okay, so I'll take that one, Kimberly. So when you look at minors, between from birth all the way to 18, your features tend to change quite often. And we're using the benchmark that the passport office is using, so we renew, using that as a standard to renew every 5 years. When you're above 18 all the way to 60, I mean, your features tend to change over a 10-year period, and research has shown that. And for persons above 60, their features tend not to change. They have more like a 15-year period, and that is why we would have used those as the benchmark.
Perfect, thank you. And I assume that this would also be an additional security feature as well, in terms of ensuring that you don't have an ID that doesn't represent who you are at the time that you present it.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you so much. We are going to move now to Twitter, and Dijana M on Twitter is asking, her question is in relation to the NIN and the TRN, and she wants to know whether those with multiple TRNs will be investigated, one, assigned one TRN, another question, that is to be connected to the NIN, another question, and she wants to know further whether such persons possessing more than one or multiple TRNs will be investigated and prosecuted.
Some of those questions are maybe out of the scope of the NIDS, but I'm going to sort of summarize everything. But the reference numbers under Clause 11C of the bill, including the TRN, that we would like persons to submit at the point of enrollment, will be vetted multiple times before the assignment of a NIN. And when I say multiple times, meaning you have multiple layers of vetting. So we're not going to just take those numbers and use them. We are going to make sure, for example, a TRN, you check that with tax admin to make sure it exists and to make sure it's the right person that it is assigned to. Then you associate that TRN to the individual. So again, it is important to note that the NIDS guarantees the association of one NIN to one TRN. The association of one NIN to one TRN. But considering fraud, any fraud detected cases during the enrollment process. And not only during the enrollment process, after the enrollment process has been completed and a card issued, because you could very well have somebody stealing someone's identity and you discover it later. All of those cases will be referred to law enforcement. The NIDS will not handle those. If you detect fraud, there's an existing framework that you must refer it to law enforcement. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now to YouTube, Hannah Hodges is asking, where will all the information be stored? And I believe Mrs. Miller-Williams answered that already, that there will be multiple databases. Do you wish to add anything to that? Or?
Yes, I will pass it on to my colleague, Mrs. Hemmings-Allison.
Yes, thank you, Kimberly. Good afternoon, Chairman, members, and to the public. So in relation to that question, the information collected will be stored in a secured government facility in Jamaica. And the question really, I would want us to understand the information that will be collected upon enrollment. And if you look at clause 11 of the bill, you will see that there is a distinction between biographic information, biometric information, and in relation to biographic information, it includes your birth certificate information, your marital status, and so on. And in relation to minimum biometric information, we're speaking about facial image, fingerprints, manual signature for individuals who are 18 years of age or older, as well as some reference numbers, which include the TRN, the driver's license, passport, electoral registration number, and so on.
Thank you so much. I'm going to move on now to Krista Z on YouTube, who's asking, when someone accesses the information of another person, can other people in the system see it and see how long they were on the records? So the questions are very, very specific, and they want to know, when someone accesses the information, can other people see it and see how long they were on the records looking at that information?
All right, thank you, Kimberly. Under clause 24 of the bill, identity information can only be verified with the request of the identity owner. It's important to note that the identity owner must be notified based on the design of the solution, also in the framework that we're looking at, and must be notified every time a disclosure or verification is done. For example, just to break that down, every time your identity is verified, you will be notified on a record of the verification with the date and timestamp stored and protected by blockchain. It's important for us to place some emphasis on that, because that is also a security component where, irrespective of your rank in the authority, you will not be able to delete your audit trail. Your audit trail will be there forever. And I recall Chairman mentioned last week that we have heavy fine for the persons who are authorized to access if they go outside of the framework.
Thank you so much.
To just talk a little about the additional component for disclosure for law enforcement.
That is Mrs. Hemmings-Allison.
Yes,
Okay.
for law enforcement.
So in relation to clause 24, which he had indicated earlier, the general principle is that the authority shall not disclose identity information stored in the national identification databases about an individual, except in 3 circumstances. 1, in accordance with the request of the individual concerned, or in accordance with an order of a judge, or as may otherwise be provided by this act or any other law. And if you look closely at clause 24, you will see that the Commissioner of Police may make an application to a judge of the Supreme Court in chambers for an order authorizing the authority to disclose an individual specified in the order, and it should not be a constable below the rank of superintendent. And so identity information in any case where the disclosure is necessary for the prevention, detection, or investigation of crime or in the interest of national security. So clause 24 is extremely extensive, and it would be prudent, for the public to really look at this clause to see the provisions in relation to the disclosure of identity information.
Thank you ever so much, Mrs. Hemmings Allison. I am quite certain that the public will be very pleased and is very, very pleased to hear that there are multiple layers of security to ensure the protection of your personal information. And you mentioned fines, Mr. Vernon. The other question is from Hinkley Rose on Twitter, and Hinkley wants to know, what if there's a breach of the data? Why is there only a fine? Is our privacy not worth more than a fine?
I'll take that one,
Okay.
Kimberly. Well, I'm happy that there are at least 4 members. And first of all, before I answer, welcome Mr. Hugh Graham from, I think it's St. Catherine, and a member of the opposition. Very happy to have you here. And this question relates to us. The question is really, is a fine enough deterrence? It's a suggestion that came about in one of the last virtual meetings where persons proposed that there should be a prison term. Now, one of the clauses provides that the maximum fine should be $3 million, where information that is stored is released by a member of staff either while they're employed or after they leave employment. We thought that $3 million would be a good enough deterrent, but the suggestion has been put to us whether a prison term should not also be an option. And we're not going to make a decision here, but it is something when we come to consider the clause. It's a suggestion being put by a member of the public, and we must give it due consideration whether in lieu of a fine, not only a term of imprisonment, but an option should be given to the judge where the information, or perhaps such large amount of information has been leaked of individual or individuals, whether a judge should not have the option to impose a prison sentence. So it is something that we will consider. And to answer the question directly, it is going to be considered by the committee when we deliberate on the bill.
Thank you, Minister. And so, Hinkley, if you're watching, the committee will consider the imposition of a prison term, consider the imposition of a prison term in relation to breach of privacy.
Minister Robert Morgan would like to add.
I think it's an important, can you hear me? Yeah. Yes, I think the whole issue of the consequences of sharing without authority personal identification information of citizens is a serious matter. If you look at where the world is going, your identity is now a commodity. Identity information is now a commodity being traded on the dark web and other places for cents on the dollar. And one of the things when we were discussing the Data Protection Act was, while it was felt that businesses should not be burdened onerously with certain stipulations, we had to move in a balance towards the customer, as one data leak can destroy the life of an individual, and it will take many years for them to recover their identity and for them to fix back their lives. So I think it's a very important decision, but as a legislator, my position has always been pro-citizen, pro-consumer. So anything that protects the consumer and ensures their identity is protected is something I will fall on that side on.
Well, there's no doubt that there will be different views. At the last meeting, Minister Johnson Smith felt that, intimated that her position would favor a stronger deterrent. It's a matter we will discuss when we deliberate, okay?
Again, very thought-provoking question posed by Hinckley Rose, and now the committee will consider whether the imposition of a fine is something that can be implemented. So keep on sending your questions. They are making a difference, and the committee will consider them very, very seriously. We move to Facebook, and this question is posed by Donna Kogan, or Gogan rather. What security process do private companies go through before getting clearance to gain access to our citizens' personal information? And if my memory serves me correctly, companies may not be able to access this information unless they go through the proper processes. So again, this question to the technical committee.
Okay, thank you, Kimberly. I'll take that one. Under clause 24, we have a very detailed provisions to treat with the disclosure. And we prefer to use the term disclosure of identity information. And in that provision, we're very clear that identity information, for it to be disclosed, the identity owner must authorize that. So it's very important to note, because that's the first step. Secondly, it is also important to note that digital identities give the user control of their data. They provide clear audit trails and streamline how businesses and governments allow people to register and to access services and trade. So, on that note, all third parties must be accredited under the NIDS program, meaning they must be in compliance with the Data Protection Act. That is our baseline. That is our reference point. They must be compliant with the Data Protection Act, and if they are compliant with the Data Protection Act, they will also have data protection officers and staff to treat with these matters. But when third parties will have to come on as accredited organizations, because this system cannot work if all of government is not able to interact with the system. But what is important is for us to understand the framework for the interaction. And the framework for the interaction basically begins with the identity owner. You must give your authorization first. Then we have audit trails. We'll log everything. It's protected by blockchain. Nobody can delete it. You will be notified. And if you see a notification that you're not aware of, you can report it to the authority. And the penalties outlined in the proposed bill, along with other penalties in the data protection law, will definitely take effect. So it's important to know that. Additionally, I also want to mention that when we designed the NIDS program, when all of the technical people across government and the private sector that participated in this, when we designed NIDS, we looked at the market and we said there are some large corporations, financial institutions, and government entities that will have the capabilities to become accredited organization and to streamline their services digitally. But there are also small businesses that will not be able to do this. So we will have the option for them to register online and just get a match or mismatch. Why is this important? We are not disclosing the identity information, but what we are saying is that this card was in fact issued by the state, and it's a valid card. So I just want to make those points.
I just want to add, Kimberly, in support of what Warren is saying, because I made the mistake at one of the last meetings.
Yes.
No one will have access to the database.
No.
What they have access to is authentication by the authority of data, or that the card is in fact a valid card. So that when someone brings the card to the bank or to a government agency, that government agency or the bank will have communicate with NERA, and NERA will be able to authenticate. So when I use the term last time, access is not access to the database. It is access to the authority, for the authority to authenticate
yes.
the validity of the card.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you so much for that clarification, Minister. So again, no person except those authorized will be able to access this information except for verification purposes through contacting the NIDS committee, the NIDS team, or the relevant authority, correct? All right, thank you so much. And the NIDS bill, I want to remind you, is available on the websites of the Ministry of Justice and on the website of the Parliament of Jamaica, and we invite you to, at your convenience, to review it to your comfort and satisfaction and come back to us with your question. This is
to Kimberly that all the justice centers have the bill on email and also on WhatsApp. They have circulated it to the justices of the peace by WhatsApp and email so that I'm putting the justice of the peace to work. Persons who would like an access to the bill can get it from the justice centers around the island or from the custodies or a justice of the peace. But as you say, they can also log on to the Jamaica Parliament website and find a copy of the bill.
Thank you so much. And if we may take a moment just to go to our Zoom, we do have a comment from Senator the Honorable Kamina Johnson-Smith, and we'll take her at this time. Minister Johnson-Smith?
Minister Johnson-Smith, are you on?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, we are hearing you. Go ahead.
Sorry, no, I hadn't been told that before that I was coming on for a comment.
All right, no problem. When you're ready. Okay, go ahead.
All right, thank you.
All right, and so we'll go right back into the questions. So this question is quite interesting. Will the new ID make doing business easier locally and overseas? I'm not sure to what extent it will make business easier overseas, but perhaps you could speak to the convenience it will bring to doing business locally.
Okay, thank you, Kimberly. And Chairman, if you maybe permit me, because this is an opportunity for us to go through in details what the benefits of the program is really about. So the NIDS focus is for local use. However, the card can also be used by Jamaicans overseas to access local services securely online. In the future, we anticipate that persons will be able to sell and transfer their motor vehicles online, renew driver's license, etc. And we are currently in discussions with tax admin, and at some point in the future, I'm sure the commissioner will be able to announce that there are a number of services that we are looking at. For example, they are looking at motor vehicle registration, the renewal of motor vehicle license, this, certification of fitness, renewal of driver's license, GCT, all of those services that you are now required to go inline at the tax office. Imagine you're able to sell your car in the night or on a weekend and you transfer it fully without going inline. The power of the NIDS behind this is because they will know who you are. Remember, the NIDS guarantees one person to one identity. So it's important to note that. Additionally, we also need to note that, firstly, we don't have a secure national ID. Let us not be fooled. There is no secure national ID in the country. We have different IDs that were created for various reasons. So we need a secure national ID to simplify the many bureaucratic processes in government. And it is important also for us to simplify those processes. For example, when you look at what is happening now with life certificates, where pensioners are required to submit life certificates, Chairman, I believe, every quarter. With the power of the NIDS, because the national identification system will be connected to your civil events, because you have a deceased person, you registered there, you'll know if the person is alive. So you can get that information and eliminate the need for life certificates. Naturally, this will also benefit the market. Insurance companies, governments, payroll, all of those things. So we would have seen in the papers about payments to persons who should not have been on those programs. We will now be able to fix all of those issues. We need a national ID also to provide a simplified route, Chairman, for persons to open bank accounts. We have so many Jamaicans now that are not a part of the formal financial system. And it is important for you to be a part of the formal financial system to really grow wealth, to put away something for rainy day, to be able to demonstrate to a financial institution so they can give you a little loan to start a business. It's very, very important. Yet, there are so many that are unable to access that. And national ID will be able to fulfill the requirements for your customer to access bank accounts. And we are in dialogues with the financial institutions. We are going to work with them side by side to make sure that when the first card is issued, the cardholder can go to the financial institution and open a bank account and have access. As part of this program, we are also helping Jamaicans that are unable now to get a birth certificate, to get their birth certificate so that they can become formalized. And you'll hear more about the undocumented program soon. And national ID, this is very important. It reduces the risk of fake and duplicate records and non-existent beneficiaries in government's welfare schemes. And we would have seen so many things in the papers, even for years, and government trying to fix these problems. And we continue to say, government, you must fix the issue of transparency. Government, you must give an account for what you're doing. But behind all of these issues are really the lack of identity, the inability to say one person to one identity. And NIDS has the potential to fix that problem. So it's important to note that.
Senator Hill would like to elaborate on that point. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I just wanted, when I use the term national ID, it's going to be different. It's a national, unique ID. Unique is very important. People will argue, can argue, that your TRN is a national ID or your passport. None of them will have what NIDS will have. NIDS is unique, and every time we talk about NIDS, we need to say it's unique. Why? Because I'm going to start, even as a banker, I'm going to start with taxes first. When you look at the tax menu, you have property tax, you have the GCT, you have a multiplicity of taxes, your motor vehicle taxes. One of the first place we must absolutely get to use this, and I know Commissioner Ainsley Powell has ramped up his tax office, and Maris is there every day telling you that you can go online. But now when you have NIDS, the National Unique ID, those long lines we see at Constant Spring and Halfway Tree and downtown will easily disappear. Now, why I don't say will it disappear the next day? Because people will have to get used to the NIDS. Some people are older and get used to the fact that this unique card is going to give you lots of benefits. But let's go to bank, where I have quite a lot of experience. Let me tell you this. Why NIDS is going to be so important to Jamaicans. It's because once NIDS is issued, Mr. Chairman, each banker is going to say to you, I need your NIDS card. Why? If I'm lending you money that's going to last 3 months, or if it's a mortgage, 15 years, I need to know that Mr. Warren Vernon is that unique person that over his lifetime is going to be identified by this NIDS card. So the unique identity. You're going to find, Mr. Chairman, that most, when you're going to go buy a car, when you go to anywhere to do anything, they're going to ask for your NIDS ID because people are going to be so confident that it's uniquely Warren Vernon I'm giving the money to, and it's uniquely Warren Vernon I'm identifying to give me back my money over the period of time. So pharmacies, the tax office, people who sell cars, lawyers who deal with real estate will be so happy to have this NIDS, so that I'm encouraging every single Jamaican who can get that NIDS card to have it, because when we advertise it as a government, don't worry, when you turn up in Florida, they're going to say, where's the NIDS card? And when you go to Japan, people who say, oh, I don't want to have my biometric, you can't go through Dubai unless you give your biometric, and the NIDS will be there with you. So I strongly encourage everybody to remember that the measure about NIDS that is so particular, it's that it's a national card, yes, but what it is a unique card to Mrs. Miller-Williams or to Minister Nestor Morgan or MP Sybil, and them can't shift it. Mr. Chairman, we have to preach this.
Thank you, Senator Hill.
Thank you. Of course.
Yes. Chairman, on that same note, Senator and member, it's important for us to also note that the national ID will be using what we call the International Civil Aviation Organization standard, meaning that when we are done, that card can also be used to travel, similar to a passport. Great. And so we could easily have, once that is in policy and there are agreements for regional travel where you use it, in Europe, they are using that. All of the countries with national IDs, you can use that to travel. In South America, you can also use the national IDs based on those arrangements to travel. So there are a lot of opportunities, because Jamaicans can also use that once we establish those agreements. I mean,
it's safer than a passport.
Yes, absolutely. And additionally, the national ID protects your identity from theft and fraud, and this is very important, and I know Chairman mentioned that earlier. A national ID can be used to sign a document or contract, and we are talking about behind your computer screen. You will be able to use the digital signature feature that is embedded in this card. Never before. This is new for Jamaica. A national ID can also be used to sign into services. What do we mean? You can use it to authenticate, as you mentioned it, Minister. You can use it to sign securely in the government service and also in the private sector, because of the security certificates and the secure nature of this tool. So a national ID is a trusted proof of who you are every time, wherever you go. Yes, unique, a national unique ID.
And let us
is
go
a proof of who you are.
Let us look at another situation too that the public at large should be aware. Just last night we passed a microcredit bill, which means that you will have hundreds of persons lending money in communities. The most amazing thing in most communities is that people don't know one another by names, you know. They know one another's by alias.
Nicknames, yes, nicknames.
And oftentimes people lend money to Dirty Foot or to Man a Yard on the basis, quite simply, that they know the person, but they don't really know the full name of that person. So with a national ID, they're able to know, bring your ID so we can enter into the contract so you can get a loan under the microcredit bill. So, you know, in the digitized age, there's absolutely no doubt that we are going to need an ID that we can, not only as Senator Hill says, that is unique, but is trustworthy. And that is what we expect that this NIDS card will be.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Senator Hill, and thank you, Mr. Vernon. You're very thorough. You have more too. Wow, so many benefits to the NIDS that we're going to continue to hear them from Mr. Vernon.
Yes,
thank you.
And it's important for us to use this opportunity to really explain what the benefits are. And a national ID can also be used to verify your address and eliminate the frequent need for a JP to verify who you are. And we are not saying that we are going to eliminate JPs completely, because the chairman would have mentioned that for us to get persons in the system, the JPs are going to be a critical part in terms of the gatekeepers, to ensure that the people who they know within the communities, that we are enrolling them based on who they are. And when they verify the address, they are signing to something that is absolutely correct. So that is important to note. And the NIDS will let people know who they are dealing with, without revealing more than the strictly necessary information. So you can know who you're dealing with without revealing all of the other information about the person. My daughter, once she gets to 18 or whatever age to start dating, I'm sure I'm going to ask the gentleman to show me his national ID to make sure that I know who he is, But anyway, I'll stop there. And those are just some of the benefits of the National Identification Program.
These are truly very, very impressive. I am personally impressed by the revolutionary capacity of the National Identification Card. And I'm sure many Jamaicans marvel at the possibility and dream of being able to renew their driver's license from the comfort of their homes at whatever time of the night. So we do have lots of questions, and I just want to take this time to remind you to continue to send your questions and to participate on social media using the hashtag JSCNIDS, that is JSCNIDS. And so we are going to ask just one more question before we move into further details in relation to the National Identification Bill, going through the various clauses. One of the questions I have is, what about persons who would like to have their biometrics done but cannot come to the island to do so and want to receive their identification cards?
Well, bear in mind that the NIDS ID is really for citizens of Jamaica, yes, and also resident in Jamaica, so that a Jamaican citizen, if he or she lives abroad, if they want a national ID, they will have to return to Jamaica in order to get all the information verified. I mean, that doesn't mean that they have to live in Jamaica, because all Jamaican citizens are entitled to this ID. But non-Jamaicans must be resident here for at least 6 months before they can register in the NIDS.
Thank you so much, Minister. So you do have to do your biometrics in Ireland, and there are certain regulations that have to be observed in relation to that. I did say that we were going to go through clause by clause now in this segment. However, before we do that, I am going to ask Miss Monique Graham, who is on Zoom, to come in with a comment. Is Monique ready to speak with us?
Yes, I am.
Perfect.
Honorable Ministers, members of the Joint Select Committee, and the NIDS technical team, good evening, good night. I'm Monique Graham, a researcher at the Caribbean Policy Research Institute, Capri, and I was the lead researcher on the National Identification System report entitled Who Am I, the People, the NIDS. Now, one of the findings of the report is that almost 200,000 Jamaicans lack any form of legal identification. And a part of this segment is our homeless population. Now, given that enrollment in this system requires an address, how will the system include the homeless population?
Yes, let me take that one. So when we discuss this matter, even with the homeless, and this is something that we are fleshing out now in the regulations, where we know that even though you may be homeless, you do have places where you frequent places. And the intent is to make that provision. So for the homeless, if your frequent place would be maybe 20 South Avenue, New Kingston, for example, then once we can verify that, then we will note that in the system. And this is very important because I mentioned earlier that addresses will not be printed on the card. And it is for this very nature because it's very dynamic and will change. Because you can be homeless today and in a couple of weeks' time you're no longer homeless. So it's very dynamic. And the intent here is to make sure that no one is left behind.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mr. Vernon. And so we are now going to go through clause by clause, and we will begin with clause 19, and Mrs. Miller-Williams from the NIDS technical team will take us through clause 19.
Okay. Before we go to clause 19, I will just want to state the use of the national identification card. So clause 17 speaks to the use of the national identification card. And this is where an enrolled individual who is issued with a national identification card may use the card to prove their identity or as a means to facilitate any transaction between that person and a third party. In terms of offenses, a person commits an offense if that person uses the national identification card to impersonate an enrolled individual, or if that person allows or permits another person to use the card to impersonate an enrolled individual. And that person shall be liable on conviction before a parish court to a fine not exceeding $3 million. In relation to clause 19, clause 19 speaks to the content of the national identification card. It specifically provides for the information on the front and the back of the card. On the front of the card, to which the individual shall be issued, the information includes or will include the national identification number, the name of the authority that issued the card, the name, date of birth, facial image, manual signature of the individual, and the nationality of the individual. In respect of the back of the card, the information will include the parish or place of enrollment of the individual, the date of issue of the card, the date of expiry of the card control number, and the category of enrollment. The category of enrollment will include whether the person is a Jamaican citizen or if they are ordinarily resident in Jamaica. It is important to note as well in this clause, clause 19, that the card shall be used as proof of the particulars on the card. So in other words, the card shall be evidence or proof of the information that the card bears.
Oh, thank you so much. And before we move on to the other clauses, I do want to ask you, can the card be cancelled, and under what circumstances can it be cancelled?
Yes, very well. The card can be cancelled. The card can be cancelled pursuant to clause 20 of the bill, which provides for the cancellation of the national identification card. The card may be cancelled if it was issued in error, if it was issued based on inaccurate or incomplete information, if the form of the card has a defect, or if the card was issued to a Jamaican citizen and that person is no longer a Jamaican citizen by renunciation or being deprived of citizenship, as well as if the card was issued to a person who was ordinarily resident in Jamaica, but that person's leave to remain in Jamaica has been revoked. So under those circumstances, the authority, that's the National Identification and Registration Authority, may cancel the card. Furthermore, where the authority cancels the card, the authority shall inform the individual of the cancellation and also of their right to appeal the decision, the decision of the cancellation. And when the card is cancelled, then the individual shall surrender or return to the authority the card within 30 days of being notified of the cancellation.
Are there any consequences for not returning it during the stipulated time period?
Yes, there is. A person commits an offense. Okay, so if a person fails to surrender the card, they commit an offense. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay,
yes,
all right.
Definitely.
All right, thank you so much for that question, for that response, sorry. And we will continue our look at the clauses, and we just want you to walk us now through clauses 21 and clause 22 of the NIDS bill at this time.
Thank you, Kimberly, for that. In relation to clause 21 of the bill, it speaks to the reissue of the cancelled national identification card. The authority may reissue a cancelled card. The authority may reissue a cancelled card if the reason for the cancellation no longer exists or has been rectified. So clause 21 speaks to that.
Perfect.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Do we have any comments on Zoom or any questions at this time on social media? Any Zoom? No? Okay. So I'm going to pause to take a question on Instagram. And this question is, with the utilization of the new address, is a very long question, technology previously mentioned affording everyone with their own unique address, do you think this will facilitate the rolling out of more apps that require this type of data? Example, Uber and food delivery apps. What other effects do you foresee this having on the Jamaican economy, its culture of innovation? And this question to any member of the technical team.
Take that one. Okay, thanks. So, again, addresses are what we refer to as public information. In fact, all of the addresses in Jamaica, they are easily available on Google. What is important here is associating an individual, with the address, and this is where you have value. But naturally, in terms of innovation, we do know that Industry 4.0 will bring plenty of opportunities for Jamaicans to innovate. But most importantly, I think we need to prepare our people in terms of upskilling our people to make sure that they can make use of these opportunities. And we would have seen recently where the Prime Minister launched the Amber Heart NSTA Coding Academy. And this is very important. Why am I saying this? Because we spoke earlier about the development of apps. But we have to think also about the development of the skills, the human resources. And once we're able to achieve that, there are a lot of opportunities because to add value, you must be able to solve a problem. And I'm absolutely sure that there will be a lot of innovative minds that will be able to utilize this tool to develop solutions to solve problems for companies. We spoke about addresses and the ability to verify addresses within the rural areas with this tool, accuracy of about 3 meters. What we envisage here is that you will now have most likely companies developing solutions for delivery, where you can now make a delivery to a rural area and you have the accuracy of about 10 feet. Imagine within the same space that we are operating in, you're able to locate and find the person. So we see a lot of innovations coming out of this, even when you look at microfinancing and so on, and the ability to verify people and loans and the banking system and all of that. The ability to know where to find people will certainly result in a lot of innovations.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vernon. Did we take clause 22, the obligations under the NIC? We did?
Yeah.
We did not? Okay, so I'm now going to ask Mrs. Janelle Miller to explain clause 22, which treats with the obligation to surrender. Or did we? We did deal with that, yes? No? No? Okay, all right, so we'll take that now.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you. So clause 22, as Kimberly had highlighted, deals with the obligation to surrender the national identification card. An individual shall surrender or return to the authority any national identification card in that individual's possession where it does not belong to that individual and appears to have been lost by another individual, or has come into that individual's possession in error and without the knowledge or permission of the individual to whom the card was issued, or was issued in respect of an individual who has died and and whose affairs the first mentioned individual has been charged. Furthermore, the individual shall surrender the card if the card has expired, if it has been mutilated or is otherwise unusable, belongs to that individual but has been previously been reported to the authority as being lost or stolen, or if the individual has reasonable cause to believe that it has been issued in error. So under these circumstances, the individual has an obligation to surrender the card to the National Identification and Registration Authority.
Right, all right, thank you so much. So we have been told under what circumstances the card may be surrendered. Now I want to ask the question posted also on Instagram. It has been stated that NIDS will help to combat passport and birth certificate fraud. As specifically as you can please outline some ways that this will help to combat crime. And I don't know if I should pose this question to the minister or to the NIDS committee, but I'll throw it out and whoever can.
Let the NIDS committee start with that.
Okay. All right, I'll take that one, Kimberly. So let me put it this way. The specific role of the NIDS is to minimize identity theft and fraud. So any crime relating to identity theft, this is where, NIDS would add significant value. But when you look at crime fighting, even though I am not an expert and that's the role of the law enforcement, there are a lot of things happening in the background, the ability to associate someone, with a crime, and there's a complete different, there are a number of different rules for that. But to give you an example, the NIDS will reduce the opportunity for the theft of a dead person's identity and to eliminate the possibility for the theft of a NIDS card holder's identity, because it is happening now. We do have people, they know this person is no longer alive, and the person may not have been a part of the formal system, and they can take over that identity and use it, and you won't know. In part, the prevention of identity theft will be achieved by linking the cardholder's fingerprint and their facial image with the birth certificate. That is very important. Right now, when you look at a birth certificate, you have no biometric information. You have no way at all to prove that, yes, this birth certificate is connected to John Doe. So this is the key, linking from birth, the birth certificate to the biometric information, to your fingerprint and facial image for life. And that is the key in preventing identity theft.
May I just add, Kimberly, that in my unique position as an attorney at law in practice, I have seen so many cases where fraud has been committed openly, in that persons have used birth certificate, not their birth certificate, but another person's birth certificate to get an identity. The persons now under assumed names of persons who have died or persons who have migrated. In fact, I know of one case in which a person who has migrated living in Canada, who is now suing a person here in Jamaica who believed that that person had left Jamaica and assumed the name of that person. That is identity theft, an ongoing case. Now we expect that the NIDS will eliminate many of these. I'm also aware that the system in America has also been defrauded. One of the reasons why deportees rarely remain in Jamaica for too long is that the ingenuity of Jamaicans is so great that when they're in the United States, they have several United States passports. So when they come down and they're deported here, they simply use another of the U.S. passport to actually go back to the United States. And I must tell you, in my practice over the few decades ago, I experienced a young lady who was a drug mule, and she was a total Jamaican, spoke the Jamaican patois well. And when she was the magistrate, then resident magistrate, said, "You're going to be declared persona non grata," I said to her, "But you won't be able to come back to Jamaica." And then she said, "Me? Mr. Chuck, me a Jamaican." But I said, "You won't be able, because when you go back, you won't be able to come back here." She said, "Mr. Chuck," I spoke to her about her American passport, and she said, "I have many of those." And I think this is happening also here in Jamaica, where the PICA has discovered quite a few Jamaicans who have had multiple passports and have recognized that has happened because they are now using facial recognition, and that is where this new NIDS card using facial recognition, fingerprint, and signature will be able to eliminate a lot of these duplication, corruption, fraud. What is also very important too, as I understand it, is that once a person gets an NIN, that's one unique identification number, that number relates to that person alone. And whether that person migrates, cancels the card, or dies, that number will not be used again. In other words, it's unique to that person, so when the person dies eventually, that number dies with the person. It will not be used again. So that will ensure that the elimination of duplication.
Thank you so much. Do we have any comments from the committee? Do you wish to add anything to what Minister Chuck has said? If not, I must say that I am personally very, very pleased with the NIDS and what it proposes to do. And I'm also happy that Jamaicans will finally have the capacity to access a unique, effective identification system that promotes the identity and security of your personal information. I'm sure many Jamaicans take great comfort in that. I'm going to go to a question now, and we have a question from Philippa Davis, and she wants to know what will be the status of the other forms of identification currently in use. Example, your passport, your voter's ID, TRN, birth certificate, driver's license, etc. Yes, thank you.
So again, we are implementing a voluntary national ID, and based on the Supreme Court's ruling, all of the existing IDs will still be available. However, the difference here is that with a national ID, you will be able to enjoy a lot more services, and your identity will be secured and unique. But a lot of those other services, will stay around for some time. In a lot of countries that would have implemented a national ID, those services sometimes remain for somewhere between 5 to 7 years until you have full adoption. But most persons eventually start using the national ID because of the ease of doing business.
Okay, fabulous. I have a question here on Facebook from Hanif Baluchi, and Hanif is asking, will the NIDS be part of new arrests? where it would be enforced upon arrest and a criminal record would be based on this ID. Again,
I doubt that.
Minister or
No,
the technical team?
no, not at all. In other words, there are certain information that will be placed on the national ID, but if a person has a criminal record, it certainly won't be a part of the NIDS information.
No.
All right, thank you.
And if I may, Kimberly,
Yes.
it is important for us to keep emphasizing that the national ID is only about identity information. So information about your bank account, information about your criminal records, all of those things are kept elsewhere. The NIDS program is just to verify who you are and to provide you with the ability to sign a document, the ability to authenticate to services. And this is very important. That's why we are capturing the minimum data set.
And you know, I want to emphasize again, Warren, that the card is not for the state's benefit. It is for the citizens' benefit. In other words, what I understand the technical team is emphasizing, that when the cards are issued, it is for the benefit of the citizens of Jamaica, so that when they have a card, they can utilize it. Various transactions, business people can verify the ID. So it is not the state using it. We're not using it for criminal detection, for example. We're not using it in any, secret way.
Right.
We're ensuring that the citizens of Jamaica has a card that they can use and access services from the private and the public sector easily.
Thank you so much, Minister. Again, the card is for the use of, and the Minister Morgan did say it is for the consumer, meaning the Jamaican citizen. It's not intended to be a tool to be used for the state, except for verification purposes, which will encourage greater convenience in the conducting of businesses, and also to ensure the transmission of resources from the state to citizens. We do have another question here, very, very important question. What provisions will be made for persons who cannot read or write in applying for the National Identification Card? And this question was posed by Cassandra, and I pose it to the technical team.
Okay, thank you very much. We would have discussed those unique cases, and naturally, in terms of breeder document or the basic information that would have been presented by my colleague earlier that is required once you are a Jamaican and once you're able to produce your birth certificate, or if you're an ordinary resident and you're able to provide the documentations required, then even if you can't read, you will still be able to enroll and to make an X.
Right. So in the same way that you're able to vote, you'll still be able to enroll in the identification system.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Another question from Philippa Davies, and she's clearly reading the NIDS bill, and she's referred specifically to Clause 11, and she's asking us to make the distinction between facial image as distinct from a photograph.
It is the same thing.
Okay.
Let's put it this way.
Pretty much the same.
Yeah, it is the same thing. Because when we say a facial image, we are just saying a photograph of the enrolled individual that must comply with certain standard.
Right. All right. Thank you. And another question. We do only have just a few more minutes before we are to wrap. Today, time really does go very quickly, and we're trying to give you as much information within the shortest possible time. So we do have the question. Kindly distinguish clearly between the NIN and the NIDS. And why do we say that the NIDS is the ID? So kindly distinguish clearly between the NIN and the NIDS. And why do we say that the NIDS is the ID? Why do we say that?
Yeah, and that's a very, very good question, because we, for communication purposes, and because we know the brand NIDS, most persons know the brand NIDS, we tend to refer to it as NIDS. But NIDS is really the system, the National Identification System. Really, when you look at that, you're talking about the processes, the people, the technology, everything that will allow you to basically facilitate the capturing, meaning the enrollment, the processing, the security, and also the issuance and the verification. But the NIN is just a number, national identification number, a unique number that is assigned to the individual for life.
Right.
And may I just say, Kimberly, hopefully tomorrow we are going to introduce another acronym. So we have 2 acronyms so far, the NIN, N-I-N, and the NIDS. Tomorrow we hope to introduce the NIRA, N-I-R-A. That is the National Identification and Registration Authority. Now that is in schedule, the first schedule. And we hope tomorrow at our next virtual town hall meeting that we will explain what is the NIRA and how it will be instituted. That authority will be totally responsible for the technical team, the staff, etc. So tomorrow we are going to hopefully explain that NIRA, N-I-R-A.
Thank you so much. And with just 2 minutes to go, we are unable to take any further questions, but I will ask that you join us again tomorrow at the same time for more information. I just want to take the time before we go to acknowledge the minister or chairman, Minister Delroy Chuck, Dwight Sibley's, MP, Minister Morgan, and of course, Mr. Lothan Cousins, Mr. Hugh Graham, of course, Senator Hill, and the members of our technical team. Thank you for being with us today, and please join us again tomorrow, same time, for more information. I will throw now to Minister Chuck for closing.
Thanks, Kimberly, and also thank you for really engaging the NIDS team with so many questions from the members of the public. Most of these questions actually came on social media. We are asking the members of the public to pose as many questions as possible so that we here, not only the committee, those of us who have studied the bill, but also the technical team can respond, and also so that we have a better understanding of some of the suggestions and concerns that the public at large have, so that we can discuss them when we meet and deliberate. So that these virtual town hall meetings came about because we feel it is important to engage you, the members of the public. We have used and are using different media so that you can pose your questions and concerns through your favorite medium. Also on social media. And again, we hope to have a few more town hall meetings tomorrow, one more tomorrow, and a few more next week, so that you can join us if you still have concerns. You can ask more questions. We will respond to them. And what is important, it must be clear that we want this process to be very open, transparent, so that every citizen of Jamaica feels that they understand, and also that they are aware of the content of the bill, so that any skepticism that you may have, please bring it to the attention of the Joint Select Committee. And bear in mind, you have an opportunity to really influence how the Joint Select Committee will deliberate. Please, those persons who are making written contribution, try and put them together and get it to Parliament so that we can invite you when the committee starts to have face-to-face meetings in Parliament to respond to those written contributions. I would like to thank the members of the committee who have joined me here at the banquet hall. Thanks to MP Hugh Graham, MP Dwight Sibley's, Ministers Morgan and Aubin Hill, and also thanks to all the members who have joined us on Zoom. I know Minister Johnson Smith is on, and quite a few members are there. So I want to thank you, the members of the public who have joined us, and please encourage others to post as many questions on social media or directly to us for tomorrow's meeting, and if not, next week. So all the best until tomorrow. I ask for a member to ask for the adjournment at this time. Meeting is adjourned until tomorrow at 5:30.
The new NIDS bill has been drafted and is ready for review. We want to hear from you. Go to www.japarliament.gov.jm to download a copy of the new bill. Join the conversation. Make a written submission to Clerk to the Houses, Gordon House, 81 Duke Street, Kingston, or via email clark@japarliament.gov.jm. All written submissions must be sent by Friday, January 29, 2021. Join the process. Let your voice be heard.